Morning, everybody. Welcome to Turnaround Tuesday. Today we're talking about cannabis. Sorry that we're a little late. I will give everybody a few seconds to. I'll give everybody a few seconds to get on. We usually start at 10 o'clock, and I think you have seen we had some technical difficulties. Technical difficulties a little bit, but I think we're going to be okay now. And anyway, sitting next to me, to my left, I guess you're right, is Jonathan Roybal. Jonathan has become a friend of ours and is actually supporting the campaign. But he's a cannabis patient advocate. And Jonathan and I have talked a lot about some of the opportunities in the cannabis thing. So let's give it a couple of seconds. Good morning, Charlie. Morning, Lucy. I'm just going on my computer and seeing everybody on board. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Anyway, we'll get started this morning. Thanks, everybody, for being here. This week is I don't know if we want to call it Cannabis Week or not. But we know Friday
Cannabis Day.
Right. Friday comes to Cannabis Day. 4/20 is Cannabis Day. So we've been doing these Turnaround Tuesdays, and we've talked about cannabis in the past before. We know how important it is in our state for medical cannabis. And let me give you some history a little bit about medical cannabis for New Mexico. I don't think people realize this, Jonathan, I know you and I have talked about it, is New Mexico was actually the first state to have medical marijuana. It was actually signed into law, and it was, I believe it was called the Medical Marijuana Research Act or something like that. In 1970, and actually my father signed it into law, right? And I remember at the time, a lot of people were talking to my dad about the medical benefits of it. And my dad and our family's always been about the people and the patients and stuff like that. So, and Jonathan, I'm sure you've heard this story before, but and some other people have too. But in 1978, New Mexico actually was the first state to have medical marijuana in our state. My father signed it into law, never knowing 2 years later his own son would use medical marijuana to get through chemotherapy. Some people might know the story, but in 1979, I was stricken my senior year in high school. I was stricken with cancer. I went to MD Anderson, was treated. The first 7 months of my treatment, I took pills. I took so many shots in my right thigh that I couldn't feel my right thigh for 2 years. And I remember the doctors having a conversation with my parents about, let's try medical cannabis to help me. My grandmother, God rest her soul, made my special dinner that night, the first time I came home, the day I tried it. My family, my parents, my grandmother were in shock how I could eat, how I felt better. And so we know the medical benefits of it on the side, and we've grown that industry now. But New Mexico was, believe it or not, we were the leaders in something at one point. And then we did let it lapse for a while, and then we brought it back years later. And so New Mexico was the very first one. And you're talking to a patient who actually lived it and benefited from it. About 2 years ago, I came back and played sports. About 2 years ago, I now have a bad back, my L3, L4, or my lower backs. And I hurt my back about 2.5 years ago. And instead of doing surgery, we decided to do rehab, and I'm fine now. We did rehab, but the doctors gave me literally 90 Vicodin. And Jonathan, I was telling you, I used to take 2 to 3 Vicodin a day. A friend of mine introduced me to his daughter, who actually works at a medical health food company, and they introduced me to CBD oils from hemp. Right. And I now use CBD oils from hemp every morning.
How many Vicodins are you taking out?
I haven't taken one Vicodin in a year and a half.
That is so awesome.
So the point is, as a gubernatorial candidate, we know the medical benefits of it. And we also know the opportunities of legalization for adult use. We've learned from Colorado, and I've been up to Colorado many times. I've met with some of the Colorado companies and things like that. And I wish CBD would get rid of this cough. I'm sure there is one that probably could.
It's in the works.
I was going to say it probably is. And so my point is one of the things our campaign has been talking about is how we can expand the medical cannabis industry here in New Mexico immediately. The hemp opportunities that we should be in right now, it's I say sinful. It's almost sinful that we can make hemp products in our state, both medical, for farming, for ranching, textiles, all sorts. So you can make the products here we just can't grow hemp here. And Jonathan, and sometimes when we talk about our JAWS plan and we've talked about agriculture, we know that hemp uses 75% less water. We know in parts of New Mexico you get 3 to 4 different harvests. So when you start adding up hemp, medical cannabis, adult usage, things like that, we're literally looking at numbers of about 32,000 new jobs across the board on different industries, right?
Yes, yes.
And that would generate almost $200 million in new tax revenues for our state. And then we can all work together to figure out, do we want to put that money towards education? Do we want to put that money towards healthcare benefits or healthcare issues? We can all decide that later, because sometimes I look at maybe going 2 different directions with the revenues that we're talking about. But we have to look at opportunities in New Mexico. So medical cannabis, we're gonna kind of break it out today, talking about it. And Jonathan is here. Jonathan Roybal is here because he's an advocate. He protects medical patients' rights. I met him a month ago, a couple weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago, and he's literally given me some good insight on some of the patients and stuff like that. And so, like I've always said, as governor, I'm going to make sure we push towards legalization of adult usage, but we're always going to protect the medical cannabis patients and our patients and stuff like that. So that's what we want to talk about really today.
Definitely.
So, so talking about that, that's our history. We've talked about the summary of it, but tell me a little bit about how you got involved in cannabis and why you said, because man, you're so passionate, specifically in the patient side.
Well, I've been involved with the program since its inception, and you know, basically, I'm here for the patients. I've been a caregiver and I've helped many people with their quality of life. And that's the bottom line here. I'm trying to help these patients get the quality of life that they deserve. And medical cannabis really helps so many people in the state that everybody should have the option to try it if they need to and receive some of these benefits.
So let me talk about, and we're going to go in different sections here, but let's talk about medical cannabis. All the gubernatorial candidates, I guess besides Pierce, you know, one wants to decriminalize it, the other one wants to do more research about it, but we've all talked about how we can expand the medical side of it. We know the PPLs out there right now, and those are personal production licenses. I always forget the second word. Personal production licenses. Again, we have to allow patients to be able to grow their own at the same time. Today, correct me if I'm wrong, today we allow 16 plants.
That's correct.
We allow 16 plants for the three different stages for medical patients. We've also created almost a black market in our state.
Of course.
Folks, we have over 50,000 medical cannabis patients in our state. And the way we're regulating it right now is we have 34 licenses?
There's 35 licensed nonprofit producers in the state, and there's more than 51,000 patients enrolled. So, and that's a 61% increase from 2016. So at this rate, Jeff, at the end of the year, we're going to have over 75,000 patients enrolled. And with the 35 licensed producers, those guys are only producing 14,550 plants. So that equates to less than 1 plant for 5 patients, which is simply not enough. That's why we have to expand this program to get more people growing, more producers, more plants, more product for our patients.
And so what I've heard is we have over 50,000 patients, but in today's environment, we're producing maybe enough for 20–25% of them.
Right.
So we're actually creating a black market.
That's right.
We're actually creating a black market by the way we're doing it. So as governor, we want to expand the program to not only more growers, but also we believe that we need to expand the plants per license.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, you get 450 plants. Correct me if I'm wrong.
That's right.
You get 450 plants per license. We've all kind of talked. I've talked to your industry. I've talked to some of the professionals. We all think that we should at least increase it to at least 1,000 plants per license. Correct?
Yes, I think that's the lowest tier that we're talking about.
Yes. Yeah. That's what we've talked about. And then also we've also talked about expanding licenses and growing licenses. Now, some of the people in the industry think we should double the size of the license. Others people think we should have unlimited licenses. And I'm okay with that. We've talked a little bit about that. I'm okay with that as long as we can monitor the newer growers for the first 12 months, because I don't want to flood the market.
Sure.
Right? I don't want to flood the market and then put a bunch of people out of business also, right? So we want to protect the growers. We want to protect the distributors also, the dispensaries also. So we have to there's a fine line we have to kind of work with there. Tell me about some of your ideas, though, as we expand. I mean, some of the audience, some of the people who talk to me, we've talked a little bit about it. We'll talk about more. But give us some of your ideas on the expansion of it that we've talked about in the past.
Well, I think we need to get more producers in the program. That's the bottom line, because there's just a shortage. And there's a medical necessity for getting more product in there. So, you know, getting more producers is going to be the key. We're also going to be doing collectives. That's going to be a big help in getting.
And just so you'll know, in the past, if you've heard me talk about co-ops, I have straightened out very quickly that in my vision, co-ops was very much like collectives, right? Collectives. And so I think some of us in the past were talking the same, you know, the same structure. I was just using the word co-op, so I don't want anybody realizing that you know,
they're interchangeable.
They're interchangeable. So I just want you to know, when I talk about co-ops, I'm talking about collectibles and how we can work together to make sure our rural communities and our unserved communities are being served through this industry.
That's the bottom line right now. Half of the dispensaries in the state are located in the Albuquerque area, which, you know, the rural areas in the state are very, very underserved. So, you know, some people have to travel a whole day just to get their medicine.
And so we've talked about in the past, you've heard me talk about growing business opportunities. So PPLs, people that are producing stuff by themselves, and if they use it, if they produce more than that they can use, then our idea is to create a collectible. Again, I use the word co-op, but create a collectible organization, nonprofit organization within these rural communities, so then we can all go to one dispensary and test it and make sure that then we can sell it to patients, correct? That's what we're talking about. So, and I think we all agree that the 14 plants today probably work today, but we've talked about we probably need to expand it up to 24 plants.
Yes, 24 plants. If we expand up to 24 plants, we could do a grow system where it's a perpetual system where you could harvest every 2 weeks, which would help all these patients that need the extra plant material. There's a lot of benefits of raw cannabis that are showing up where people are just going to need the extra plant material. So bumping that thing up, Jeff, is a very, very good thing. You're going to help a lot of patients out by doing that.
So to summarize, and we will take some questions. So I'm going to try and keep it to about 15 minutes, 20 minutes of a conversation here, and then we'll open up to questions. And so let's talk about legalizing it for adult use. Now, I'm the only candidate that has said I would push immediately when I get into office to work with the legislators for adult use. We have learned from Colorado, we have learned from Oregon, we've learned from other states, and I think it's an opportunity for the state. States around us, excuse me, states around us are legalizing it all over the place. And so we think it's a great opportunity for New Mexico. So when you look at hemp production, when you look at legalization side of it, and then the expanding the medical side of it, excuse me, we're looking at 32,000 new jobs in the state of New Mexico, creating over $200 million in new tax revenues. Now, let me make this very clear. As your governor, I'll make sure that we're always protecting the medical side of it, because on the medical side, you've heard me talk about this in the past. We want to make sure that we're growing the medical side and the adult side at the same time, but we have a different structure where the medical side won't be taxed. There'll be a gross sales tax on it, but there won't be a corporate tax or a business tax on it. On the adult side, there will be. And we're talking between 18 and 24% on the tax side and the business side, because we know that's where the majority of the revenue comes from some of these other states when they're regulating it.
Right.
Saying that. But our goal is always to make sure that we protect the medical patient and the medical side of it moving forward. So, but we think there's a great opportunity for adult usage. We know the agriculture benefits of it. We know the rural community benefits of it, the revenue opportunities of it. I'm the only candidate running in office. In fact, we had a health forum about 2 weeks ago, and they asked all of us flat out, where do you stand? And I was the only candidate to say we would legalize it, and I would push for legalization because I think it's an opportunity for New Mexico. The other candidates, two have flat out said they don't want to legalize it for adult usage. One said they want to decriminalize it. Well, that's part of our plan too. And then the other one said, Grisham said that she wants to research it more. She wants to protect the medical side of it, which is great. but she seems very hesitant about what she wants to say about legalization of it. So I can tell you right now, that's one of our jobs plans is to invest into that. On the legalization and the medical side, I'm just going to talk very quickly about this. You've heard me talk many times about the $23 billion, and we're going to invest $1 billion into low-debt finance loans in New Mexico. Part of that business model is also giving low-debt finance loans in this industry. We have to make sure that this will always be a New Mexican-based company, businesses. You've heard me talk before how one of our biggest issues in our state is all our industries have literally been bought up or owned from outside entities, and so they take all our profits outside the state. This is a new industry that we can grow and expand. I just want to make sure it's New Mexicans leading that way and protecting New Mexican growers, New Mexican dispensaries on the medical side and the adult side and the hemp side, and do that. At the same time, I want to work with the universities. UNM is one of the top biotechnology research institutions in the country. I have talked to some of the cannabis people up in Colorado, in fact, a few weeks ago. In fact, some of the people saw that I was at Lidwell, which is one of the largest producers in Colorado for adult use. But the biggest thing I was most interested in is they're actually doing research on cancer research with THC levels in the 92 to 100% levels.
Right.
And they're actually doing research, and their biggest frustration is that they really can't do any research with the universities because of federal laws, right?
Unfortunately, a lot of this research is coming from Israel, where they don't have these.
Where they don't have these. And Canada. And now it's coming to Canada. And now with Canada legalizing it for the whole country, all these companies, these research companies, are literally looking at moving to Canada. And by the way, folks, we have 2 companies in New Mexico right now that are doing research on it too. So what I want to do is I want UNM and our research around the world to be the leaders within biotechnology, cannabis research. And then down in Las Cruces, New Mexico State, we have one of the top agricultural research universities in the country. And I've always made a joke about this. If New Mexico State can create 36 different types of green chilies, don't you think we can kind of work together and kind of create different strains for medical benefits across the board?
Most definitely. New Mexico can be the leader in this marijuana industry. This could be bigger than this would be the most lucrative industry in our state, bigger than film, bigger than pecans, even bigger than our beloved green chili. The craft beer industry has exploded in New Mexico, and just because we've given them the opportunities. It's now a $350 million industry, and cannabis will exceed that by far.
So let's talk a little bit about, I have some of my ideas, but let's talk about your ideas because we talked a little about it. When we do legalize it in the state of New Mexico, what are your concerns? What's your vision looking for on the legalization side?
Well, some of the biggest concerns I have, and I know a lot of the patients are on the same page with this, is that when adult use does get legalized, this might create a further shortage. We're already, at the point where we don't have enough to supply our patients as it is. So when we do legalize for adult use, that's going to further strain the supply. So that's why I'm a proponent of adding more producers. That way we can address that issue. That way none of our patients go without any of their supply. So that's going to be a big issue that we have to address.
And I think we've talked about it when we legalize it, and people have asked me, like, will you double or triple the size of the licenses? I think we should look at a model like Colorado. Colorado has no limits on licenses and no limits on plants. What they do is they give you a license. They literally monitor you for 12 to 18 months. And as you grow your business, and correct me if I'm wrong, when you first start out, they give you like 800 plants per license. And then if you're productive and you're moving forward, because what Colorado doesn't want to have is a bunch of bankrupt, out of business cannabis growers, right? So Colorado actually has no limits. What they're doing is they literally give you a license, and you can grow up to 800 plants. And then after you're in the business for 12, 18 months, and you've proven your model, and you've proven you're following the guidelines and the rules, they actually we've looked at that kind of model. I think that model would work here too, because absolutely, as we expand into the adult use, we definitely have to grow our products and stuff like that. Now, as governor, I'm not looking at just recreational use. Also, I'm also looking at opportunities that we have within hemp production. That's within agriculture. That's within feed. That's within manufacturing. Plus, it also within agriculture and industry. So there's great opportunities there.
There's another issue that is very big with the patients that you can address, that they need some protection here, because a lot of people are afraid of losing their jobs, being terminated. Even though they have this prescription for marijuana, a lot of people will get terminated on the spot because of their usage.
Right.
Conversely, people with opioid prescriptions, they don't have to worry about this.
Right.
Another issue is that's something that you're going to have to do to protect these patients.
Right. No, and we looked at some of those, and actually I've talked to some of the Colorado manufacturing companies, child safety programs they put in play. 25% of their revenue goes into education and opportunities. And no matter what my opponents say, I've looked at research, we posted on the Facebook the other day, we know the #1 issue in our state is opiate addiction. Across the state, states with cannabis medical programs, 25% reduction in opiate addiction.
Yes.
And one of my opponents said that was wrong at a health forum the other day. And I just said it's not. I mean, it's literally, I mean, we looked at the statistics.
Yep.
And actually, Colorado has seen a drop in adult usage and youth usage, almost 15 to 20% in Colorado and in Oregon based on that. So again, it's about educating, it's about regulating, it's about monitoring. And folks, as your governor, you're going to hear me talking about investing into opportunities. Now, we are going to create low-interest loan programs for both medical producers and adult use producers and even hemp producers. We're going to continue, when I talk about investing into small businesses, we're going to continue pushing small businesses within this industry. We're going to protect New Mexico industries. I don't want big pharma, I don't want big outside companies coming in, so let me clarify something. If some of you see me visiting with cannabis companies in Colorado or Oregon or now in California, doesn't mean I want those companies to come here. We can learn from them, we can talk to them, but my goal is always to have New Mexico-based industries. One of our biggest issues in the state of New Mexico is we have so many of our industries that are owned from outside states, outside entities. I want to make sure we grow this and have New Mexico owned and protect New Mexico owned businesses. Before we start taking some questions, Jonathan, anything else that we missed on the adult side that we might want to talk about?
Most importantly, you know, as far as legalizing adult use, the 5 Western states have already done it. This is leading to booming industries. You know, they're exceeding all estimates and all expectations. The fact of the matter is, some of the southern counties in Colorado are experiencing some of the biggest growth in the marijuana sales, and that's directly from New Mexicans driving up, crossing the border, buying it, driving it back down. So that Colorado pot is already coming down here. There's no reason why we shouldn't legalize it and get some of that money. As a matter of fact, Colorado should be sending us a check with some of that cut every month. So
Colorado tourism is up 32%.
Yeah.
Mitchell, are these the questions? Okay. So let's take a couple of questions real quick, and we'll kind of banter back and forth, Jonathan, a little bit. The first question from JB, and I think we just answered this. What can we do to learn from Oregon, California, and not squeeze the small guys out to ensure outside companies dominate the market? Well, I think, first of all, Colorado, and correct me if I'm wrong, Colorado only allows local Coloradoans to own companies. Oregon did not do that, and so you've seen a lot of the outside. And if you talk to the people in Oregon, they literally said that was probably a mistake. And so I've talked to some of the folks up there in Oregon. So JB, what we are going to do is, like we said earlier, we're going to protect New Mexico-based industries, New Mexico-based interests. And we might learn from them. We might bring some of their technology here, and absolutely, they want to come invest in a minority ownership, because you've always heard me talk about we need private capital in our state, investing in our state. But we will protect New Mexico businesses and not be squeezed on that. What we've learned from California and Oregon and some of the states that have been doing it longer on the adult side is the good and the bad, and I think we can learn from them. We can protect that. Anything on that? I think we agree to that.
Yeah, I think you hit it on the head there.
Eva's, and I'll let you answer first on this one. What can we do to ensure medical patients are protected from wrongful termination based on medical cannabis?
That's kind of what we were talking about initially. We need protection. That's the bottom line. People should not be afraid to use medicine, and it doesn't make any sense to fire people when you're on opioids. You cannot perform some of these jobs, and you know, some of these jobs are sensitive where we can't have bus drivers.
Right.
You know, So this is going to have to be a case-by-case basis.
Right, and we've talked about it where we'll decriminalize, because another thing we haven't talked about yet is, just so you'll know, 37% of the people that are incarcerated in our prison systems today that are literally clogging down the system, so that now the violent criminals are getting out. We want to decriminalize. The non-violent criminals, and we spend $221 million a year on decriminalizing. Incarcerating them. So we actually want to decriminalize that and actually move them to rehab training programs, and also create opportunities with them in this industry. So I think we have to work with some of the laws on making sure that this is a medicine. We can do some more research and stuff like that. And yes, there are probably some industries that we have to talk to them about, making sure that they're not using it on the job and stuff like that.
Right.
But Colorado, Oregon, California has adjusted to that, so I think there's things we can learn on that. The next question from Mike, how will you deal with gun ownership and cannabis use? You probably know a little bit more about that than I do.
Well, I know for certain ailments, it's a touchy issue. You cannot own a gun and have your recommendations. And I know that's a big issue. I know there's a lot of veterans in the program.
Right.
And they have fought for our country. They served. If they want to own a gun, I think they should have the right to do so.
Well, and I think Jonathan and I talked about it. We both. I don't know if you're a gun owner or not, but I'm a gun owner. We both believe in the Second Amendment. We know today that within the cannabis industry, we know today that that if you're a cannabis patient, you can't buy a gun, right? And we have to protect our veterans' rights. And so specifically, and again, I think we have to all sit at the table and solve this issue out, because this is a much deeper issue on background checks. I think we have to do background checks. But yes, today, just if you don't know, today, correct me if I'm wrong, Jonathan, today if you answer a background check that you're a medical cannabis user, you cannot purchase a gun.
Right.
And so I don't think that's probably fair. So what we have to do is we have to sit down at the table and work with everybody and come up with that, because you are correct. We know the medical benefits for our veterans. I've talked to too many veterans.
Yeah.
We know it's helping them out. I mean, I've talked to veterans that are suicidal, and they get on medical cannabis, and they're functional, and they're doing fine. So we know the benefits. And by the way, if there's a Second Amendment guy I want carrying a gun, it's probably a veteran who's been trained to use one of those guns, right? And so, so we would protect our veterans' rights and cannabis rights. But I think at this time, you know, as a governor, I think if you're a veteran and a medical cannabis user, you should have the right to bear an arm. So we believe in that, and probably across the board, I would be a little bit more flexible on that. But at the same time, I think this is a situation that we have to sit down and talk to everybody and say, look, there has to be a compromise here, because we know the medical benefits, and for the medical benefits, and then you can't go deer hunting because you can't buy a deer gun, you know, a 243 to go hunting.
Right.
Makes no sense. So, Mike, the goal is we have to work that out. I do believe that, you know, if you're a medical patient, specifically our veterans, and you're also an Amendment 2 gun owner, we have to work with that. We'll work that out. I'm sure there's some other issues with that. I don't have a name here, but will you work to expunge the records of individuals and marijuana records? Yes, I don't know who asked that question, but I think it was Mitchell. But yes, I think we already mentioned it, and we've been very advocate about it. We want to decriminalize that 37% of the people that we incarcerate. We want to decriminalize them and move that monies into rehab training programs. 37% of the people we incarcerate in our state are non-violent criminals. We spend $221 million a year through the judicial system, incarcerating them, and kind of moving forward, or our police services. And so our proposal is let's decriminalize that. That's bogging down the system for violent criminals.
Yes.
That's $225 million that we spend today. We would then move that over to rehab training programs, because we know where the jobs are. We can give them training opportunities. And folks, when we do that, rehab training programs on average cost about $23 a day versus incarceration about $100 a day. So we know it would be about 65% less. Now, I believe we would expunge the records of anybody for marijuana possession. And yes, if you would have to take a look case by case and take a look at it case by case, depending on the criminal you did, what kind of crime you did with that. If it was a violent crime with a gun or something like that, to me, that's a violent crime.
Sure.
And so we look at different ways
for minor possession. Thank goodness they decriminalized it here in Albuquerque. I can't imagine a bigger travesty than the APD being bogged down trying to bust somebody on a simple possession charge when there's murder after murder after murder being unsolved in this city.
Right. And so that's kind of our goal. That's kind of our goal too. So I think we addressed that. Mitchell, do we have any more questions at all? Anyway, Jonathan, as we wrap up, just let me summarize real quick, because we're right at the 30-minute mark. So I know we started a little late today, but thank you so much for joining us today. Friday is 420. That's Cannabis Day. We are the only campaign that has said that we would legalize adult use. We think it's an opportunity for New Mexico. When you start looking at hemp production, when you start looking at adult use, when you start looking at the medical side of it, we're looking at 32,000 jobs within this industry, over $200 million of tax revenue within this industry. So it's an opportunity for New Mexico that we can get ahead of the curve. Folks, we were the first state to have medical cannabis in 1978. I'm probably the only gubernatorial candidate running that has experienced it through chemotherapy. It's helped me get through it. So we know the medical benefits of it. We've learned from adult usage. Between our universities, we could literally lead the world in biotechnology research within the cannabis industry and within the agriculture side. So as your governor, we're going to be looking at opportunities and investing in opportunities. So I ask you to follow our campaign. We have 5 weeks left in our campaign. On Friday the 20th, we're going to be up in Santa Fe at a couple of functions, talking about it, being on panels, talking about how we can legalize it, how we can move our state forward, looking at opportunities like this. So this is just one of many of our strengths and opportunities for New Mexico. So I ask you to follow our campaign. I ask you to come volunteer for us. Call bank for us. We need more donations to keep us on the air, because we know our competition is going to come out with a bunch of money the last 3 or 4 weeks in the campaign. So if you like what you hear, go to our jobs plan, go to our website, apo18.com. Look at our jobs plan, look at our education plan, look at our health plan. It's time we start investing in New Mexico. So thank you all so much. Jonathan, any last words?
Yeah, I'm vote for Jeff. He's the guy that's going to protect our patients' rights. We need a guy like Jeff in office.
Well, thank you for that, and I appreciate the support. And it's people like Jonathan that are advising our campaign that are protecting patients' rights. We're also talking to the growers, the researchers across the board to make sure that we're doing it the right way. So
one more thing, just to make sure everybody knows that Jeff is planning on raising the plant counts to 24. I want to make sure everybody knows that this is a big deal for patients.
Yep.
I see the comments now; people are already misinformed. So make sure everybody knows.
Yeah, I think the last thing, I think there was some confusion there, because I talked about adult usage and I said 3 plants for adult usage, and I think there was some confusion in my last turnaround, my last cannabis conversation, because they were thinking on the medical side.
Correct.
And again, we're on the adult side for personal use, where I come up with the 3 plants. That's what Colorado does. Mm-hmm. That's what some of the other states do. So I'm not saying that's the perfect thing for New Mexico. I'm just saying on the adult side, that's where I'm looking at right now, just because that's what other states have done. So anyway, thank you so much for joining us. We're at the 33-minute mark. Thank you all so much for joining us. Turn in next Tuesday for Turnaround Tuesday. I really don't know what the topic's going to be next week. Friday is 420. Take a look at, if you've never used medical cannabis, take a look at it. It's an opportunity for New Mexico. But thank you all so much for joining us today. Everybody have a blessed week.